Welcome to SPN's InternNet. I am Todd Davidson's SPN Senior Director of Strategy Development. I'm joined today by the CEO of the Beacon Center, my good friend Justin Owen. Justin, welcome.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, Justin, we're going to jump right in. Justin, what is the role of the Beacon Center in your community?
Well, you're very familiar with SPN, obviously, if you're involved in this network. And we are the SPN affiliate in Tennessee, in Tennessee's premier free market policy organization. And we see our role as driving positive policy change, not only inside the political circles, inside the state legislature, inside the state capitol, and in local governments across the community, but changing the culture in our state in a way that embraces free enterprise, individual liberty, and limited government.
So you mentioned driving positive policy change. So talk to us about how you determine which policies you're going to focus on.
It's difficult because there are a lot of great ideas out there, right? We've got a lot of things that we could focus on and advance. So every year we actually sit down as a team. We invite our entire staff to brainstorm and come up with a wish list. We say, what are the big problems facing our state? Is it lack of health care? Is it lack of quality education? What changes need to be made to our tax structure? Those kinds of things. And come up with a wish list of things that we think should be advanced in the state. But then we really try to become laser focused. In past years, we would actually create a legislative guide where once we came up with those 40, 50 ideas, we would actually publish those in a book and send those to legislators. And then legislators would call us and say, hey, I'm really wanting to work on this one obscure environmental issue. And we'd go, well, that's kind of 49 out of 50 in terms of priority. Sorry, we can't help you out. And they'd get mad because they would say, well, why are you telling us to do this if you're not willing to lean in on it? And so we became very laser focused and said no more than 4, 5, 6 max issues that evolve into legislation that we push at a time. And so we actually have a matrix. It's a little complicated, but our policy team's really good at going through this process. And we ask 2 real questions. One, how central is this to our mission? We exist to empower Tennesseans to reclaim control of their lives. So is this really helping them do that? Or is it just a good policy change? And the more central it is to our mission, the higher of a priority it becomes. And then the second question is really that Overton window question that you'll probably learn more about is how politically feasible is this right now? If it's something that the public doesn't really understand or potentially is even against you on, then maybe we need to spend a couple of years educating the public and moving that needle so that we can make it politically feasible. But if it's already feasible, if it's achievable, then it gets a higher ranking to be made a priority that year. So going through that process really allows us to take, again, 40 to 50 issues and drill them down to 5 or 6 tops. And that's where we spend our energy focusing over the next year.
So I spend a lot of time working with organizations that have kind of gone through this process where they start with 50 issues and then they boil it down to 5 or 6. And there's always pushback from staff, from even donors, probably from other people, because there's an assumption that going from 40 to 50 to 6 means that you're going to be sitting around a lot. So tell me, in your experience, going from 40 to 6, did you take longer vacations, more time off? What was the reality of your work life?
You get busier, regardless, you're going to either do 40 things not too well, or you're going to do 5 or 6 things really, really well. And the amount of time and energy you spend on things is the same. You can be much more efficient with it because everybody's repeating the same talking points and focused on the same areas and rowing in the same boat, if you will. But you're not getting distracted by all of these different things. And so, in fact, you're just as busy. You're just busy rowing in the same direction and getting better results than you could if you were spreading yourself too thin.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, but fewer priorities does not give you more free time, makes you more busy. So speaking of that, metrics. I want to talk about results because a lot of times you cast 40 or 50 policies, priorities, and then maybe you get 10 of those and you tell yourself you've had some success. Uh, but now that you've focused in on 5 or 6, like how do you measure your results that prove that you're getting really good results?
First, you have to know what to measure, right? I mean, I think part of the problem with some in our network is the focus on the wrong metrics. They focus on metrics. They at least measure things. You got to measure things to know whether you're successful. But if you're focused on vanity metrics or this pathological optimism that doesn't tie to actual results, then you can wander astray or spend a lot of time in an area that you shouldn't. So, for example, a good vanity metric would be, we're going to get 1,000 media hits this year. Well, if all of those media hits are attacking the credibility of your organization, that's not a good result. You need to make sure that whatever you're measuring leads to that result that you need. Another that is often measured in this network is, we issued a policy report. That's not a good metric. It's a foundation, it's a start, but what comes after you issue that policy report is what's important. And I think that goes back to your question about 40 and 50 issues versus 5 or 6. When you're an organization like ours, if you spend all of your time publishing policy reports that you hope somebody will do something with, you're not going to get good results. But if you focus on publishing solid research, and it's a foundation for everything we do, you've got to have that solid research. If you focus on building that strong foundation and then building on top of it, then you're going to have a nice house. But you don't just build the foundation and walk away and hope somebody else comes along and builds the house for you. So the communication strategy, how you message issues, how you reach the public and change their perceptions, how you reach policymakers and change their perceptions, the stories you tell that bring that policy to life and show that it impacts real people, those are the things that you need to measure in terms of success, not just, well, we published 30 policy reports this year, maybe somebody will do something with them.
I like that analogy of a policy report as the foundation, because we do need strong data. We need strong research that proves that our positions are correct, but you don't just stop there. You have to build on top of that. So the next question is kind of, if you're a young person, you're looking into policy, or you're looking into communications and outreach, you as a CEO, which one of those positions are you looking to hire in your organization?
Well, you got to have both, obviously. As you said, that foundation is extremely important for everything we do. But if you don't have the tools to build on top of that, then you're never going to have a house. And so when you don't take those great ideas and transform them into actual something tangible that people can utilize, then it's just not going to go anywhere. And so you're really wasting your resources and you're wasting your time. And so we found, number one, there's so many great ideas in this network that we don't really have to replicate a lot of them. And so we've just built a base of volunteer senior fellows that our policy director runs and organizes. And when we have an education issue that we need to really take a deep dive into, we'll partner with Jonathan Butcher, who is one of the foremost experts in our network on education policy and so forth. And we have that for healthcare, criminal justice, and different issues. And so we don't have to hire more policy people. We can tap into the brilliant minds that are already within our network and partner with them. So I would hire more communications and outreach people. In fact, Beacon was one of the first think tanks to hire a dedicated outreach person whose job was to focus on going and finding stories to tell that showcase how our policies impact real life people and building relationships with communities, in most times communities that we've not been good at building relationships with in the past. And so we have a full-time person dedicated to that role. And that's where I would spend, especially for many of the groups in our network. We need better communication. We need better outreach. We need better relationship building with people who don't think like us. And so as a CEO, I would spend my energy building up those capacities rather than building a taller mountain of policy experts, because we already are sitting on top of a huge mountain of wonderful ideas. We just need to turn those ideas into action.
And do you find that the outreach is a two-way street? I've talked to think tanks where through outreach and through communicating with different audiences, they've actually found policy problems that wouldn't have even been on our radar. Have you had that experience?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that distinguish us from a lot of traditional think tanks, that it's been very academic. You sit in an ivory tower and think, if I were if I had this problem, how would I solve it? And when we actually go out into the real world and talk to people, we find that sometimes what we think is the problem doesn't really bother them, but then they have this huge problem that we didn't even know about, and they probably even have some ideas about a solution that solve their very real problem. And so we spend a lot of time building coalitions of people within a given area, whether it's criminal justice reform or economic liberty, property rights, where we bring people together who are directly impacted by those issues on a day-to-day basis. And we listen to them. We tell them, give us feedback. Let us know what challenges you're having with your local government or with the state government, so that we can craft real solutions, not just solutions that we think are answers to a perceived problem, but actual tangible solutions to a real problem. And you want to talk about getting people engaged outside your walls and outside your organization. When you offer a solution that actually solves their problem, they will take up arms. They will do everything they can to come testify at the legislature, contact their legislators, tell their networks, get you to come speak at the events they organize. You can really engage people in a way that you never could if you had to convince them that they've got a problem and that we've got a solution to their problem.
Yeah, I like that. So I want to switch gears a little bit. So you go into these communities and you build strong relationships, you identify problems, and then your asset is you have strong relationships in the capital. And a lot of these communities probably maybe don't have those kind of relationships. So I want to shift gears to talk about the capital, and how do you balance influence with independence? So you could be really close with the governor. I know you were very close with your governor in Tennessee. So how do you have influence with the governor and not be perceived as a shill of the governor?
Yeah, this is a delicate balance of groups that find themselves in a position of influence, because you can go overboard and really lose your credibility. For us, we've historically been more of an outsider, that strong independent voice on issues, and we'll disagree with policymakers on the left and the right. And so for most of our history, that's how we've been viewed. Our new governor has been in office for about 18 months now. Was a longtime Beacon supporter, had never run for office, ran and won. And so we are perceived to have a lot more influence than over, not over him, but with him, than we had in our previous governor, who we went to battle with quite often. And so for us, number one, throughout our history, we've said, we're not going to call politicians names and question their motives. We're going to focus on the issues and the policy positions. And if we criticize their policies and they still disagree with us and get mad at us, that's their problem. And this is something I learned from Joe Lehman, who runs the Mackinac Institute and Mackinac Center, and really understands how to strike that balance, and has done a great job in Michigan. So we borrowed that for Tennessee. And it's really worked well for us, because it's allowed us to maintain that independence while still having a level of influence in helping drive policy within the legislature and with the governor. But it's a constant battle. Every time we weigh in on something, pro or con, we have to look at, how is this going to be perceived? And maybe we need to nuance our messaging a little bit and that kind of thing. But you just can't be afraid to tell them when they're wrong. And I think that the first time you do it, you're going to get phone calls, and they're going to be very unhappy, and they're going to say some things that they probably shouldn't say off the record, but they start to respect that that's the position you are. Literally yesterday, Stephanie, our executive vice president, tweeted something that made a very high level official in our state upset. And he called me and said, something's got to change about this. And we talked it through and agreed to disagree and maintained a very respectful relationship there. So it can be done. It's not easy. It's not always fun, but it's important to strike that balance. You want to have influence, obviously, but you can't become a shield. You can't just be, an extension of the governor or a legislator, this legislative leader or the mayor or whoever that you're working to influence and work with.
So part of maintaining those relationships, inevitably you're going to have to compromise, which for principle-driven organizations that seek to advance principles, compromise can feel like you're sacrificing your principles. So talk to us about how Beacon Center approaches compromise.
Well, there are two types of compromise. There's compromising your principle, to get the end result, that more Machiavellian approach to it, the ends justify the means kind of compromise. And then there's incrementalism and compromise through, we're not going to get everything we want because the political dynamic just isn't there, or the political environment just isn't there. But it's better to take things from a 1 to a 6 than from a 1 to a 0, or staying at a 1. And so you really have to look at it that way. We never compromise our principles. We have been called many, many ugly things as an organization. Unprincipled has never been one of them. In fact, it's the opposite. People acknowledge that we are principled to a fault in many ways, to the point where we will get crossways with very powerful politicians because of that. But we also are very pragmatic, and we're effective, and we are able to achieve significant policy reforms because we are willing at times to adopt incrementalism. And as long as you're not, we don't horse trade, right? We don't say, well, we'll support this tax increase if you support this bill over here that we are supportive of, or this policy that we're advancing. That's horse trading. That's what politicians do. We never do that. Now, we might say, this isn't as much as we wanted, but this is the best we're going to get. We'll take it. A perfect example is through our new ESA program. We've been fighting for school choice for 9 years in the state. And finally, last year, our new governor proposed an ESA program. It got amended down and down and down to where it only applied to Memphis and Nashville. But those are still our 2 largest school districts. It still is over 100,000 families that would qualify and benefit from this opportunity. And we got passed it with 50 out of 50 votes needed in the House. So we obviously couldn't go any further. We could have walked away and said, no, you know what? We don't believe in geographic restrictions. We don't want a program that's that limited. But we would have left thousands and thousands of families cut out of an opportunity that we did have. And so we accepted that. We're still not done. We're going to continue fighting until every family in our state has meaningful choice. But we didn't compromise on the principle in that situation. We compromised on the practical politics of it and accepted some incrementalism. So you had to view those as 2 very different things.
Awesome. I love that example of not horse trading, but we will look at things incrementally. I like that breakdown. So final question for you today. We're talking to a lot of young folks in the network. What's the future of this state think tank network, and what future do you foresee?
Well, I'm very excited by it. We got a lot of work on our hands, especially after a pandemic and the things we've seen in terms of the role of government. We are the check against that, and we are always going to be that backstop that protects freedom and free enterprise. And I think that we've got a bright future in doing that. I think that state level public policy will continue to be at the forefront. Washington will continue to be fractured and unable to achieve serious policy change. I think you might see some advancement in certain areas, but at the end of the day, I think where the real action is will continue to be at the state level. So I think groups like ours are extraordinarily important, not only at playing a role in that, but helping drive what direction states can head. So we've got a tall task ahead of us in this new age, but I think it's an exciting one, and I think there is tremendous opportunity for us to leave a mark on our society in a very positive way. And always remember, for the great thing about being in this network is those people that we help and lift up and get government out of their way, remove those hurdles. Almost in every single case, they have nowhere else to turn but us. And so not only is it an exciting and fun role, it's an absolutely necessary one for a lot of Americans who literally don't have anywhere else to turn. And they need us in order to succeed and to make their lives better.
I love that. They have nowhere else to turn. It's a fun and absolutely necessary role. That is a great way to end this conversation. I really enjoyed talking with you this morning, Justin. Thank you for joining us. And for further information on what Justin and his team, as well as several think tanks across the country, are doing, check out spn.org. Go to our blog. You'll see constant updates on what organizations like the Beacon Center in Tennessee are doing and how they are helping, how they are that check on the growth in government in states across this nation. Thank you for joining us, and have a great afternoon.